At a lavish ball, the millionaire laughs loudly and provokes, "If you play this piano, I'll marry you, janitor." The guests, eager for more humiliation, surround the scene with mocking gazes. But the janitor turns the keys into pure art, revealing a talent worthy of masters. In that moment, the elite realizes they weren't witnessing a joke, but the rise of a true virtuoso. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. The grand ballroom of the Rosewood Hotel in Manhattan sparkled with crystal chandeliers, each one worth more than what most people earned in a year. New York's elite had gathered for the annual Sinclair Foundation Charity Gala, an event that made the society pages every year without fail. It was the kind of night where fortunes could be made or lost over champagne conversations, where connections forged during dessert could lead to billion-dollar deals by breakfast. Catherine Kate Sinclair moved through the crowd with practiced ease, her blood-red silk Valentino dress flowing around her like liquid wealth. At 30, Kate was the crown jewel of New York's business world, sole heiress to Sinclair Technologies, a tech empire that had revolutionized artificial intelligence and quantum computing. Her perfectly styled blonde hair and flawless makeup weren't just personal choices. They were part of the Sinclair brand. "The third quarter projections are conservative," Kate said, gesturing animatedly to the CEO of a promising startup she was considering acquiring. "If we integrate your neural interface with our existing platforms, we could double those numbers." She stepped backward without looking, champagne flute held casually between manicured fingers. The collision was gentle, barely a bump, but it was enough. Kate felt something press against her back, followed by the distinct sensation of cold liquid seeping through expensive silk and onto her skin. The room didn't fall silent immediately. Instead, there was a ripple effect. Conversations nearest to the incident halted first, then the pause spread outward like a wave until the entire ballroom held its breath. Kate turned slowly, her green eyes narrowing as they landed on the source of the interruption. A man in a hotel staff uniform stood frozen, his face a mask of horror, as he stared at the dark stain spreading across her $30,000 dress. The silver tray he'd been using to collect abandoned glasses was now tilted, evidence of the crime. "What the hell?" Kate's voice cut through the silence, sharp as a blade. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Ethan Miller wanted to disappear. 5 years of working at the Rosewood without incident, and now this. He was just doing his job, collecting glasses, staying invisible as the wealthy conducted their business. That's what they wanted from people like him. Silent service, faces without names. "I'm so sorry, miss," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the humiliation burning in his chest. "You stepped back without looking. I'll pay for the cleaning." The crowd had formed a circle around them now, vultures sensing blood. Kate's laugh was cold and cruel, designed to entertain her audience at his expense. "You'll pay for it?" She looked him up and down with deliberate slowness. "With what money, sweetheart? Your janitor salary?" Titters of laughter rippled through the gathered spectators. Smartphones appeared discreetly, capturing the drama for tomorrow's gossip. Ethan saw a young man with perfectly styled hair position himself for a better angle, his iPhone recording everything. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," Ethan said, fighting to keep his voice level. "It was an accident." "An accident?" Kate repeated, her voice dripping with contempt. She raised her voice, playing to the audience that had gathered. "Ladies and gentlemen, this man is living proof that some people are born to be invisible, to clean up other people's messes, not to be among real people." The words struck Ethan like physical blows. 5 years of anonymity had been comfortable, a shield against a past too painful to face. But invisibility by choice was different from being erased by another person's cruelty. Something shifted in Ethan's eyes then, a flash of dignity, of fire long suppressed. Kate noticed it, and it irritated her further. How dare this nobody look at her with anything but deference? Her gaze drifted to the grand piano on the small stage at the end of the ballroom. A Steinway concert grand that had been positioned for the evening's entertainment, a renowned pianist who was scheduled to perform later. A malicious smile spread across Kate's face as inspiration struck. "I have an idea," she announced, voice raised to ensure everyone could hear. "See that piano over there? If you can play it better than a professional pianist, I'll marry you." The ballroom erupted in hysterical laughter. Someone shouted, "I'll bet $500 he can't play a note." Another voice called, $1,000 says he embarrasses himself completely. Kate's smile widened as the humiliation deepened. This would teach him his place. The ultimate power move, offering something so absurdly unattainable that it highlighted the unbridgeable gap between their worlds. What she didn't expect was Ethan's response. "I accept," he said quietly. The laughter faltered. Kate blinked in surprise. "Excuse me?" "I said I accept your challenge," Ethan repeated, louder this time. A murmur ran through the crowd. This was getting interesting. The hotel manager appeared at the edge of the gathering, sensing trouble brewing at his most prestigious event of the year. "Sir, this isn't necessary," the manager began, but Ethan was already walking toward the piano, his movements deliberate and unhurried. "Let him go, Gerald," Kate called to the manager. "Let's all enjoy the show." The crowd parted reluctantly, some guests already returning to their conversations, assuming the entertainment value was over. They expected nothing more than an embarrassing attempt from a desperate man, a few clumsy notes perhaps, before he was escorted away. What happened next would change everything. Ethan sat at the bench, adjusting it with the practiced movement of someone intimately familiar with the instrument. His fingers hovered over the keys for just a moment, a pianist's pause, a gathering of energy before the storm. Then he began to play. The first notes were simple, almost deceptively so, a gentle melody that nonetheless carried perfectly across the now quieting room. Within seconds the complexity increased, his left hand adding harmonies that complemented and challenged the main theme. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Champagne glasses froze halfway to lips. All eyes turned toward the stage. Ethan's fingers moved with increasing confidence, transitioning into a technical passage that required years of training. His hands flew across the keyboard, executing perfectly timed jumps between octaves, scales that cascaded like sonic waterfalls, and chords that demanded fingers working independently in different rhythms. Kate stood motionless, the champagne stain on her dress forgotten. This was not possible. This man, this invisible man she had just humiliated, was playing with the skill of a concert pianist. The piece built to a crescendo, Ethan's body now fully engaged in the performance, leaning into particularly emotional phrases, pulling back for the delicate passages. His face had transformed, all humiliation gone, replaced by complete immersion in the music. Martha Johnson, who had worked at the Rosewood for 23 years, stepped forward from the staff lined against the wall. Her eyes were wide with recognition. "That's Ethan Miller," she whispered to a shocked guest beside her. "He was a piano prodigy, graduated from Juilliard at the top of his class. Everyone said he would be the next great American concert pianist." An elegant older woman in the crowd gasped, "I thought he looked familiar. I saw him perform at Carnegie Hall when he was just 22. He was brilliant. The critics said he had the most promising career of his generation." The final notes of the piece hung in the air, a question unanswered, a story unfinished. The silence that followed was absolute, as if the entire room had collectively forgotten how to breathe. Then the applause began, hesitant at first, then building to a thunderous standing ovation. Phones that had been recording an expected humiliation were now capturing something extraordinary. Genuine admiration replaced mocking laughter. Everyone was applauding, everyone except Kate Sinclair, who stood frozen in place, her perfect world cracking beneath her feet. And in the back of the ballroom, Richard Sinclair, Kate's uncle and interim chairman of the Sinclair Technologies Board, watched with calculating eyes, already seeing opportunity in his niece's public misstep. The night had only just begun. Ethan remained at the piano, his fingers still resting on the keys as the applause washed over him. 5 years of silence broken in an instant, 5 years of hiding from who he truly was, shattered by a cruel joke that had backfired spectacularly. The crowd surged forward, wealthy patrons who had ignored his existence moments ago, now desperate to speak with him. Their faces showed a mixture of embarrassment and fascination, the uncomfortable recognition that they had misjudged someone so completely. Kate stood rooted to the spot, her designer heels seemingly fused to the marble floor. Her mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. This wasn't in the script. People like her made declarations, and the world bent to accommodate them. People like him, service workers, invisible people, weren't supposed to have hidden depths or talents that surpassed her expectations. Martha Johnson pushed through the crowd toward Ethan, her hotel uniform standing out among the designer gowns and tuxedos. At 62, Martha had seen everything in her decades at the Rosewood. Celebrities having meltdowns, billionaires cutting backroom deals, politicians with their mistresses. But she had never witnessed anything like this. "I knew it was you," she said, reaching Ethan before the socialites could engulf him. "The moment you started playing, I used to see your picture in the lobby display when you performed here for the Winter Gala back in the day." The crowd hushed, hungry for the story. This was better than any entertainment the gala committee had planned. Ethan looked up at Martha, a sad smile crossing his face. "I didn't think anyone would remember." "Remember?" A woman in a midnight blue gown stepped forward. "Mr. Miller, I was at your debut at Carnegie Hall. My husband and I had season tickets. The critics said you were a once-in-a-generation talent." Tyler Brooks, the young man who had been recording everything, pushed his way to the front, his phone still capturing every moment. The son of tech investor William Brooks, Tyler had built a following of millions across social platforms by documenting the excesses and dramas of the elite social circle he'd been born into. "What happened, man?" Tyler asked, his genuine curiosity breaking through his usual cynical social media persona. "Why are you working here instead of performing worldwide?" The question hung in the air. Kate found herself holding her breath, waiting for the answer despite herself. Ethan's hands finally left the keys, coming to rest in his lap. The gesture was filled with a profound weariness, as if those hands carried the weight of a past too heavy to bear. "Life happens," he said simply, but the pain behind those two words was unmistakable. Martha placed a hand on his shoulder. "His parents died in a car accident 5 years ago," she explained, her voice gentle but carrying enough for everyone to hear. "He was an only child. Found out they had spent everything they had to fund his musical education. Left him with nothing but debts." A collective murmur of sympathy ran through the crowd. Kate felt something unexpected twist inside her chest, a sensation she wasn't accustomed to. Was it guilt? "I sold everything I had to pay off those debts," Ethan continued, his voice stronger now. "Including my piano. Music reminded me too much of them. Every note was—" He trailed off, unable to finish. The crowd had fallen completely silent. Several women were discreetly wiping away tears. Even some of the men, hardened Wall Street traders and corporate lawyers, who prided themselves on their emotional restraint, looked visibly moved. "So, I chose anonymity," Ethan concluded. "A simple job, a fresh start." Tyler's phone captured every word, every expression. His followers were exploding with notifications as the live stream continued, numbers climbing from thousands to tens of thousands within minutes. Kate felt eyes turning toward her, the woman who had publicly humiliated this man, the woman who had made a mockery of his pain, the woman who had promised to marry him if he could play better than a professional pianist, a promise he had unequivocally fulfilled. "Well," she said, attempting to regain control of the situation, "that was certainly unexpected." Her words fell flat in the emotionally charged atmosphere. Someone in the back of the crowd booed. Richard Sinclair chose that moment to step forward, the perfect picture of dignified concern. At 55, Richard had the silver fox good looks of a man who appeared in Forbes's most eligible bachelor lists despite his age. As the interim chairman of Sinclair Technologies, following the unexpected passing of Kate's father 2 years ago, he had positioned himself as her mentor and protector. Only Kate knew how desperately he wanted her position, how carefully he cultivated board members and investors to question her readiness to lead. "I think we've all had enough excitement for one evening," Richard said smoothly, placing a proprietary hand on Kate's shoulder. My niece clearly made her comment in jest. No one seriously expected anyone to honor such an absurd proposition. But the damage control came too late. Tyler Brooks was already typing on his phone, eyes gleaming with the thrill of a viral moment in the making. "Too late, Mr. Sinclair," Tyler said, not bothering to hide his satisfaction. "This is already trending. My pianist Janitor is taking off. The video of Ms. Sinclair's promise already has over 50,000 views, and it's only been up for minutes." Kate felt the blood drain from her face. Public humiliation was one thing when she was the one inflicting it. Being on the receiving end was an entirely new and unwelcome experience. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice rising. It was obviously a joke. Nobody took it seriously. But the faces around her suggested otherwise. The crowd had witnessed her cruelty, her deliberate attempt to humiliate someone she deemed beneath her. Now they had also witnessed Ethan's extraordinary talent and heard his heartbreaking story. The contrast could not have been more stark. "I believe a promise is a promise," said an elderly gentleman, his bow tie slightly askew. Harold Winters, one of the original investors in Sinclair Technologies and a member of the board. His opinion carried weight, and he knew it. Richard's grip on Kate's shoulder tightened imperceptibly. She could feel his anxiety vibrating through his perfectly manicured fingers. This wasn't just a social embarrassment anymore. It was becoming a potential business liability. Ethan stood up from the piano bench, drawing all eyes back to him. The staff uniform he wore seemed incongruous now, like a costume that no longer fit the man inside it. "I don't want to marry anyone who doesn't want to marry me," he said with quiet dignity. "I didn't play to embarrass Ms. Sinclair or to hold her to an impulsive promise. I played because—" He paused, the realization seeming to dawn on him as he spoke. "I played because I needed to remember who I was, who I still am, beneath everything else." The simplicity and honesty of his statement moved through the room like a cleansing wave. In a world of calculated statements and strategic positioning, raw truth was a rare commodity. Kate found herself staring at him, really seeing him for the first time. Not as a service worker, an inconvenience or an obstacle, but as a person of substance and depth. The sensation was unfamiliar and unsettling. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion somewhere more private," Gerald, the hotel manager, suggested firmly. The gala guests were still watching the drama unfold with unconcealed fascination, cocktails and canapés forgotten. "An excellent suggestion," Richard agreed quickly. "My niece's office is in the Sinclair Tower just 2 blocks away. We can resolve this matter discreetly." But discretion was already a lost cause. Tyler Brooks was still streaming, his followers multiplying by the second. Social media was lighting up across platforms with clips of the confrontation, the extraordinary performance and the emotional revelation that followed. "The Sinclair heiress just got totally owned," read one comment. "This pianist deserves better than to clean up after these entitled rich people," said another. "I'm not going anywhere with you," Ethan said, addressing Kate directly. "I have work to finish." The statement was so unexpected that Kate found herself speechless again. This man, whom she had publicly humiliated, whose extraordinary talent had just been revealed to the world, was choosing to return to collecting empty glasses as if nothing had happened. "You can't be serious," she finally managed. "I've never been more serious," Ethan replied. "Some of us honor our commitments, Ms. Sinclair, even the ones that don't come with viral videos and social media attention." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Kate standing alone in the center of a circle of judgmental stares and whispered comments. For the first time in her privileged life, Catherine Sinclair had no idea what to do next. By morning, Catherine Sinclair's world had been turned upside down. She sat in her penthouse office at Sinclair Tower, watching the numbers climb on multiple screens with horrified fascination. Tyler Brooks's video had reached 5 million views overnight. Major news networks had picked up the story. The hashtags pianist, janitor, and Sinclair promise were trending globally. "This is a disaster," Kate muttered, scrolling through the comments section against her better judgment. The court of public opinion had rendered its verdict, and it was devastating. Entitled rich girl gets what she deserves. Who else is Team Ethan all the way? Sinclair Technologies stock dropping. Karma is real. That last one stung particularly hard. The company's stock had indeed dipped 3 points since the market opened, a clear response to the viral controversy surrounding its heiress and CEO. Jessica Park, Kate's assistant for the past 5 years, entered the office with her usual efficiency, though her normally impassive face betrayed a hint of strain. Being the right hand to New York's most suddenly infamous billionaire was not what she had signed up for. "The PR team has drafted 3 potential statements," Jessica said, placing a tablet on Kate's desk. "They're recommending the 3rd option. Apologize, make a donation to a music education charity, and move on." Kate scanned the statements, her frown deepening with each platitude-filled paragraph. "These are terrible. They sound like I'm apologizing for a bad restaurant review, not for—" She trailed off, unwilling to articulate exactly what she had done. "For publicly humiliating a former concert pianist who now works as a janitor because of family tragedy, then offering to marry him as a joke, only to have him demonstrate extraordinary talent that made you look cruel and shallow in front of millions of people, Jessica supplied helpfully. Kate glared at her. Yes, that. The intercom buzzed. Ms. Sinclair, your uncle is here to see you. Kate sighed. Send him in. Richard Sinclair entered the office like he owned it, which, Kate sometimes suspected, he believed he eventually would. His Savile Row suit was impeccable as always, his silver hair perfectly styled, his smile concerned yet somehow satisfied. Quite a situation we have, Catherine, he said, helping himself to the chair across from her desk without waiting for an invitation. We? Kate raised an eyebrow. I don't recall seeing you in any of those viral videos, Uncle Richard. The Sinclair name is on all of them, he replied smoothly, which makes it very much a we situation. The board is concerned. There it was, the thinly veiled threat that had been hanging over Kate's head since she assumed leadership of the company after her father's passing. The board. Richard's carefully cultivated allies who questioned whether a 30-year-old woman, regardless of her Stanford MBA and 5 years as COO, was really ready to lead a multi-billion-dollar technology company. The board should be more concerned with our quantum computing breakthrough than with a social media tempest in a teapot, Kate said dismissively, though her stomach tightened. Richard leaned forward, his expression a perfect mask of avuncular concern. Catherine, this isn't just about one embarrassing video. This is about judgment, leadership, the image of our brand. We've positioned Sinclair Technologies as the pinnacle of innovation and sophistication. How does it look when the CEO publicly humiliates a service worker only to be revealed as classist and out of touch? It was a mistake, Kate admitted reluctantly. I'll issue an apology. An apology won't be enough. Not this time. Richard's tone was regretful, but his eyes gleamed with something that looked suspiciously like triumph. The board is calling an emergency meeting this afternoon. Kate sat up straighter. Without informing me, I'm the CEO. Which is precisely what we need to discuss. Richard stood, buttoning his jacket with practiced ease. 3 o'clock. I've taken the liberty of having Jessica clear your schedule. After he left, Kate sat in stunned silence. Was this really happening? One moment of cruelty captured and amplified by social media, threatening everything she had worked for. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. You should see this. Attached was a link to a morning talk show. She clicked it with trepidation. Joining us now is Martha Johnson, a longtime employee of the Rosewood Hotel, who witnessed last night's viral confrontation between tech heiress Catherine Sinclair and former concert pianist Ethan Miller. Kate watched in growing horror as Martha recounted not just last night's events, but added context that made her look even worse. He's such a kind young man, Martha was saying. Always helps the older staff with heavy lifting, stays late without complaining, never mentions his past glory, and the way Ms. Sinclair spoke to him like he wasn't even human. That wasn't a one-time thing. That's how those types see us working folks all the time. They just don't usually get caught showing it. The hosts nodded sympathetically. And what about the marriage promise? Do you think she should honor it? Martha laughed. Lord, no, that poor boy deserves better than to be tied to someone who doesn't see his worth. But she should certainly make amends somehow. The segment cut to a music critic who discussed Ethan's promising early career, complete with archive footage of a younger Ethan performing at Carnegie Hall, his fingers flying over the keys with the same mastery he had displayed last night. Kate closed the video, her head pounding. This wasn't going away with a press release and a donation. Jessica appeared at her door again. There's someone here to see you. I'm not taking visitors, Kate snapped. I think you'll want to see this one, Jessica insisted, uncharacteristically firm. It's Ethan Miller. Kate froze. Here? Now? Why? He wouldn't say, but given the circumstances, I thought you might prefer to speak with him privately rather than have him leave, and potentially speak to the press about being turned away. Fine, Kate said after a moment. Send him in. Ethan Miller looked different in daylight, dressed in jeans and a simple blue button-down shirt, rather than the hotel uniform. His brown hair was slightly tousled, his face more angular than she had noticed last night. There was a quiet dignity in his posture, despite the obvious awkwardness of the situation. Mr. Miller, Kate said, her voice carefully neutral. This is unexpected. Miss Sinclair, he acknowledged with a slight nod. I apologize for coming unannounced, but I thought we should talk. About last night, or about the media circus that's followed? She gestured to the screen still displaying the fallout across various platforms. Both. He remained standing, declining her gesture toward a chair. I didn't want any of this to happen. Kate laughed bitterly. You could have fooled me. You accepted my ridiculous challenge. You revealed your hidden talent in the most dramatic way possible. The entire internet is calling you a hero for standing up to the evil billionaire. I didn't ask for that, Ethan said quietly. I didn't ask Tyler Brooks to film everything. I didn't ask to become a hashtag. Something in his tone made Kate look at him more carefully. Beyond the awkwardness, beyond the lingering dignity, she saw exhaustion. While she had been dealing with PR nightmares and board machinations, he had been thrust into an unwanted spotlight that dragged up painful memories he'd spent 5 years trying to forget. Why did you come here? She asked, her voice losing some of its edge. Because this has gone too far, he replied. I'm getting calls from agents, record labels, concert promoters, people who ignored me 5 years ago when I needed them. Late-night shows want me as a guest. Someone left a grand piano outside my apartment building this morning with a card saying, "Play again." Despite everything, Kate felt a twinge of amusement. And that's bad? It's not what I wanted, Ethan said, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I chose anonymity for a reason. Now, my face is everywhere, along with my story, my pain, my past. All of it exposed and commodified for public consumption. Kate was silent for a moment. She hadn't considered that Ethan might be as uncomfortable with the viral attention as she was, albeit for different reasons. So, what do you want from me? She finally asked. I want us to fix this, together, before it gets even more out of control. Before Kate could respond, her office door burst open. Richard strode in, followed by 2 men in expensive suits whom Kate recognized as board members. Catherine, we need to... Richard stopped abruptly when he saw Ethan. His expression shifted from surprise to calculation in an instant. Mr. Miller, what an unexpected pleasure. Ethan stood his ground, though Kate noticed his discomfort at the intrusion. Uncle Richard, we were in the middle of a private conversation, Kate said pointedly. Which is exactly what we need to discuss, Richard replied, his tone pleasant but his eyes hard. The board feels that private negotiations with Mr. Miller at this juncture could be seen as admission of liability or worse, an attempt to silence him through financial means. That's not what's happening here, Ethan interjected. Richard ignored him, addressing Kate as if Ethan weren't present. The board has decided that until this situation is resolved, it would be best if you took a temporary leave of absence from your duties as CEO. The words hit Kate like a physical blow. You can't do that. Actually, with the support of the majority of the board, we can, Richard said, not bothering to hide his satisfaction now. It's for the best, Catherine. We need to protect the company. Kate looked from Richard to the board members, then to Ethan, who appeared as shocked as she felt. In the space of 24 hours, her life had completely unraveled, her reputation destroyed, her leadership challenged, and now her position itself under threat, all because of a moment of cruelty to a man she had deemed invisible. The irony was unbearable. This is outrageous, Kate said, rising from her chair. You can't force me out based on a personal incident that has nothing to do with my leadership of this company. Richard's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened. The incident reflects your judgment, Catherine, and judgment is everything for a CEO. I agree, said a new voice from the doorway. All heads turned to see Jessica standing there, tablet in hand, her professional demeanor firmly in place, despite the tension crackling through the room. Ms. Park, this is a private meeting, Richard began, but Jessica cut him off with a politeness that somehow managed to be steel-edged. A meeting about company leadership taking place without proper notice to all board members, in violation of the corporate bylaws, Article 7, Section 3, she said, swiping through her tablet, which states that emergency board actions require electronic notification to all members at least 2 hours in advance, with confirmation of receipt. Kate had never loved her assistant more than in this moment. We're simply having a preliminary discussion, Richard backpedaled smoothly, about removing the CEO. That's not preliminary, that's actionable, Jessica countered, looking up from her tablet. And I've just sent documentation of this improper meeting to all board members, along with the company's legal counsel. Richard's face flushed red. The two board members with him shifted uncomfortably. "Perhaps we should reconvene properly this afternoon as originally planned," one of them suggested, already backing toward the door. Richard had no choice but to agree, though his expression promised consequences. As they left, Kate collapsed back into her chair, the adrenaline rush fading and leaving her shaky. "Thank you, Jessica," she said quietly. "Just doing my job, Ms. Sinclair." Jessica glanced at Ethan, who had remained silent throughout the confrontation. "Would you like me to show Mr. Miller out as well?" Kate considered for a moment, then shook her head. "No, Mr. Miller and I still have things to discuss." She looked up at her assistant. "But I'd appreciate it if you'd prepare a summary of all board members' voting positions and any potential conflicts of interest, particularly regarding my uncle." Jessica nodded, understanding the implication. Right away, when the door closed behind her, Kate and Ethan were left in an awkward silence. "Your uncle really wants your job," Ethan finally said. Kate laughed humorlessly. "He's wanted it since my father appointed me as his successor instead of Richard. He's been patiently waiting for me to fail for 2 years. She ran a hand through her perfectly styled hair, not caring that she was messing it up. "And now I've handed him the perfect opportunity." Ethan walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Manhattan. The city stretched out below them, millions of lives intersecting in countless ways, most of them invisible to each other. "Why did you do it?" he asked, his back still to her, his question reflected in the glass. "Humiliate me like that?" The directness of the question caught Kate off guard. She was accustomed to people dancing around difficult topics with her, deferring to her wealth and position. "I don't know," she answered honestly, surprising herself. It was reflexive. "You were convenient." "Convenient," Ethan repeated, turning to face her. "An invisible person to use as a prop in your performance of power." The assessment was so accurate it stung. "That sounds terrible when you put it that way." "Is there a good way to put it?" he challenged. Kate stood and walked over to join him at the window, keeping a careful distance. "No, there isn't. What I did was cruel and unnecessary. I could blame it on stress or the pressure of running a company at 30 or a dozen other things. But the truth is simpler and uglier. I did it because I could, because that's how people like me are allowed to treat people like you." The admission hung in the air between them, raw and uncomfortable, but undeniably true. "At least you're honest about it," Ethan said after a moment. "That's something." "Is it?" Kate shook her head. "Honesty doesn't undo the damage. To your privacy, to my company's reputation, to both our lives." They stood in silence, watching the city below. Two people from different worlds brought together by a moment of cruelty that had spiraled beyond either of their control. "Why did you really come here today?" Kate finally asked. Ethan took a deep breath. "Because I need this to stop. And you're the only one with enough power to help make that happen. What exactly do you want to stop?" "All of it. The videos, the interviews, the speculation about whether you'll honor your promise to marry me, the agents calling, the record labels suddenly interested in the tragic comeback story." His voice grew more animated as he continued. "The talk shows dissecting my past, digging up old reviews and performances. The journalists camping outside my apartment building. The piano delivery this morning was the last straw." Kate studied him with genuine curiosity. "Most people would see this as an opportunity, a second chance at a career you were brilliant at." "I gave up that career for a reason," Ethan said quietly. "Playing last night, it was liberating, yes, for a moment, but it also ripped open wounds I've spent 5 years trying to heal." Kate found herself moved by his vulnerability. "And you think I can help make it all go away? You're Catherine Sinclair. Your family practically owns this city. If anyone can shift the narrative and get the wolves to hunt elsewhere, it's you." The request was both flattering and daunting. Kate wasn't sure she had the influence Ethan believed she did, especially not now, with her own position under threat. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from Jessica. "Emergency. Turn on any news channel now." Kate grabbed the remote from her desk and switched on the wall-mounted television. A solemn-faced news anchor appeared mid-sentence. "Exclusive interview with Richard Sinclair, interim chairman of Sinclair Technologies. who is raising concerns about his niece's leadership following the viral incident. The screen cut to Richard, looking appropriately grave and concerned as he spoke to a reporter. Catherine is brilliant and has tremendous potential, he was saying, but this incident reveals a troubling pattern of impulsive behavior and questionable judgment that has the board deeply concerned. Leadership requires maturity and sensitivity, especially in today's social media environment. Are you suggesting Ms. Sinclair should step down as CEO? The reporter asked. Richard's expression was a masterpiece of reluctant duty. I would never presume to make that decision. That's for the board to determine. But as interim chairman, I have a responsibility to ensure stable leadership, especially as we approach the launch of our most important product in company history. Kate muted the television, her hands shaking with rage. He's making his move, using this situation to paint me as unstable and immature. Ethan watched the silent footage of Richard continuing to speak, gesturing with practiced sincerity. He's good, very convincing. He's been waiting for this opportunity since my father appointed me as his successor, Kate said bitterly. Richard always believed he should have been next in line, not me. Her phone began ringing, calls from board members, major investors, PR consultants, all demanding explanations, reassurances, damage control. Kate ignored them, her mind racing as she tried to formulate a plan. I need to counter this immediately, she muttered, more to herself than to Ethan. Get ahead of the narrative before the board meeting. Show leadership, not reactivity. She turned to Ethan, seeing him in a new light, not as the victim of her cruelty or as a problem to be solved, but as a potential ally in the fight for her professional survival. Mr. Miller, Ethan, she said, the use of his first name marking a shift in their dynamic. I think we might be able to help each other. Ethan raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. You want the attention to stop. I need to demonstrate growth and leadership. What if we presented a united front? Not the ridiculous marriage scenario, obviously, but something that shows we've moved past last night's incident in a productive way. What did you have in mind? Kate's mind was already racing with possibilities. A joint statement? No, that's too corporate. A joint appearance? A collaborative project of some kind? I'm not interested in being a prop in your reputation rehabilitation, Ethan said firmly. That's not what I'm suggesting, Kate insisted, then paused as a new idea took shape. What if we turned this into something meaningful? Something beyond both of us? Ethan's expression remained skeptical. Such as? Music education, Kate said, the concept forming as she spoke. A Sinclair Foundation initiative to fund music programs in underserved schools, with you as an advisor, not just a face or a story to exploit. For the first time since entering her office, Ethan looked genuinely interested. Keep going. You know firsthand what access to music education can do for someone's life. I have the resources to make it happen on a scale that could help thousands of kids. We announce it together, not as a billionaire's apology or a publicity stunt, but as a genuine commitment to something that matters. Ethan walked away from the window, pacing as he considered the proposal. It would need to be substantial, not just a one-time donation to make headlines and then forgotten. Of course, Kate agreed eagerly. Long-term funding, infrastructure, instruments, scholarships. And I'd need real input, not just my name attached to your PR strategy. Kate nodded. Absolutely. You'd help shape the program from the ground up. For a moment, hope flickered between them, the possibility of transforming a viral humiliation into something genuinely meaningful. Then Ethan's expression hardened again. And what happens after your board meeting? If you keep your position, does the initiative continue? Or does it disappear once it's served its purpose of saving your job? The question stung because it revealed the calculation behind Kate's seemingly altruistic proposal. But instead of defensive anger, she felt something unfamiliar. Respect. Ethan was seeing through her in a way few people ever had. That's a fair question, she admitted, and I don't have an answer that you'll find convincing right now. All I can say is that I'm offering a path forward that could benefit both of us, as well as thousands of kids who might never get the opportunity you had. Ethan studied her face, searching for sincerity. I need to think about it. Before Kate could respond, her office door opened again. Jessica stood there, her professional composure showing cracks of genuine concern. Miss Sinclair, the board meeting has been moved up. They're gathering now. Now? Kate checked her watch. That's not possible. The bylaws require... They're citing an emergency provision, Jessica interrupted. Your uncle has convinced enough members that immediate action is necessary. Kate's stomach dropped. Richard was moving faster than she'd anticipated, capitalizing on the momentum of his media appearance. I need more time, she said, looking from Jessica to Ethan. I need to prepare a response, a plan. You don't have more time, Jessica said gently. They're waiting for you in the main boardroom. All of them. The weight of the moment settled on Kate's shoulders. Everything she had worked for, everything she had built was at risk. And the man standing across from her, the man she had publicly humiliated just hours ago, might be her only hope of saving it. Ethan, she said, her voice quiet but urgent, I need your answer now. Ethan Miller looked at Catherine Sinclair, really looked at her, and saw not the arrogant billionaire from last night, but a woman fighting for her professional life, offering a compromise that could benefit them both. His decision would change everything. I'll go with you, Ethan said finally, not because I've forgiven you, but because your uncle seems worse, and because this music education idea has potential, if it's real. Relief washed over Kate's face. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Ethan warned. I haven't agreed to anything specific. I'm just willing to hear more and maybe speak to your board. Kate nodded, accepting the limited victory. She turned to Jessica. Tell them we're on our way. As they walked down the corridor toward the boardroom, Kate tried to organize her thoughts. The hallway seemed longer than usual, each step bringing her closer to a confrontation that could end her career. Before we go in there, Ethan said quietly, I need to understand why this matters so much to you. Is it just pride? The title? The money? Kate slowed her pace, considering the question seriously. It's complicated. We have about 30 seconds before we reach that boardroom. Uncomplicate it. Kate stopped walking altogether, turning to face him. This company was my father's life's work. He built it from nothing, and he believed in me enough to choose me as his successor, despite tremendous pressure to go with Richard or bring in an outside CEO. If I lose this now, it's not just my failure. It feels like I'm failing him too. The raw honesty in her voice surprised even her. She rarely spoke about her father or her emotional connection to the company. It was easier to discuss market shares and quarterly projections than the deep personal drive that pushed her. Ethan studied her, his expression softening slightly. Your father sounds like he was a good man. He was, Kate said simply. Demanding, sometimes difficult, but fair. And he saw something in me that sometimes I'm not sure I see in myself. What's that? The ability to lead with purpose, not just profit. Kate gave a small, sad smile. I'm not sure I've lived up to that vision, especially after last night. The admission hung between them, unexpectedly vulnerable. For a moment, they were just two people who had lost parents they loved, trying to honor legacies left behind. Let's go, Ethan said, breaking the moment. Your board is waiting. They resumed walking, reaching the imposing double doors of the main boardroom. Kate squared her shoulders, transforming before Ethan's eyes from a woman grappling with doubt into the confident CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. Follow my lead, she murmured, then pushed open the doors. 14 faces turned toward them as they entered, 12 board members, plus Richard and Sinclair Technologies' chief legal counsel, Eleanor Winters. The surprise at seeing Ethan alongside Kate was evident in their expressions, particularly Richard's, whose momentary flash of alarm was quickly masked by a welcoming smile. Catherine, Richard began smoothly, we weren't expecting Mr. Miller to join us. This is a private board matter. Mr. Miller is here at my invitation, Kate replied, her voice carrying the authority she had cultivated over years in boardrooms around the world. As he is central to the situation we're discussing, I thought it appropriate to include him. She moved confidently to her seat at the head of the table, gesturing for Ethan to take the empty chair beside her, a power move that placed him in a position typically reserved for honored guests or key executives. Richard's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. While we appreciate Mr. Miller taking the time to join us, the board needs to discuss matters of corporate governance and leadership. Surely that would be uncomfortable for an outsider. Actually, Ethan said before Kate could respond, I'm very interested in corporate governance, particularly when it might be manipulated for personal gain. A murmur ran through the room. Richard's smile became brittle. "I assure you, Mr. Miller, everything happening here is in accordance with company bylaws and with the best interests of Sinclair Technologies in mind." "Including your interview with National News less than an hour ago?" Kate asked pointedly. Before the board had even met to discuss the situation, several board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Eleanor Winters, the legal counsel, frowned slightly. "I was approached by reporters," Richard defended. "As interim chairman, I had a responsibility to address the situation." "By suggesting I should be removed as CEO," Kate said flatly. "I did no such thing," Richard protested. "I simply expressed concern about recent events and their potential impact on the company." "Which brings us to the purpose of this meeting," said Harold Winters, the elderly board member who had been at the gala the previous night. At 78, Harold was the longest-serving board member and a contemporary of Kate's father. "Richard has called for a vote of no confidence in Catherine's leadership." All eyes turned to Richard, who straightened in his chair. "It gives me no pleasure to do this," he said, his voice grave, "but after last night's incident and the subsequent media firestorm, I believe Catherine has demonstrated a lack of judgment that compromises her ability to lead effectively." "One incident," Kate countered. "In 2 years as CEO, during which our stock price has increased 43%, we've launched 2 major product lines successfully, and we're on the verge of a quantum computing breakthrough that could revolutionize the industry." "Business success doesn't excuse personal failings," Richard replied, "especially when those failings become public and affect our brand. The Sinclair name stands for excellence, innovation, and integrity." "Integrity?" Ethan repeated, his voice cutting through the tension. "Is that what you displayed last night, Ms. Sinclair, when you publicly humiliated a hotel employee for an accident that was your fault?" The room fell silent. Even Kate looked stunned at Ethan's direct challenge. "No," she admitted after a moment. "It wasn't. What I did was inexcusable." Richard leaned forward, sensing victory. "Then you admit your behavior was inappropriate for someone in your position?" "I admit my behavior was inappropriate for any human being," Kate said firmly. "I was cruel to Mr. Miller. I treated him as less than a person. I used my position and privilege to humiliate someone I deemed beneath me." She turned to face Ethan directly. "And I am deeply, genuinely sorry for that." The apology hung in the air, unexpected and unvarnished. No PR spin, no corporate language, no attempt to minimize or deflect. Just honest acknowledgement of wrongdoing. "What happened last night was a failure," Kate continued, addressing the entire board now. "Not a failure of business judgment, but a failure of basic human decency. And while I understand why that might concern you as representatives of this company, I would argue that how I respond to that failure is the true test of leadership." She stood, commanding the room's attention. "Mr. Miller and I have been discussing a new initiative, a substantial commitment from the Sinclair Foundation to fund music education programs in underserved communities across the country." Richard scoffed. "A transparent attempt to buy good publicity. The board won't be fooled by such an obvious ploy." "It's not a ploy," Ethan interjected, surprising everyone by speaking up. "At least it doesn't have to be. Access to music education changed my life. It can do the same for thousands of kids who would never have that opportunity otherwise." "And what exactly would your role be in this initiative, Mr. Miller?" Richard asked, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer. "A well-paid figurehead to help restore my niece's tarnished image." Ethan met Richard's gaze steadily. "My role would be to ensure it's not just a PR stunt, to make sure the programs are substantive, sustainable, and actually reach the kids who need them most." "A noble sentiment," Richard said dismissively, "but hardly relevant to the matter at hand, Catherine's fitness to lead this company." "I disagree," said a quiet voice from the end of the table. All heads turned toward Margaret Chen, the newest and youngest board member besides Kate herself. "I think it's exactly relevant." Richard frowned. "How so?" "Leadership isn't about being perfect," Margaret said. "It's about how you respond when you fail. Catherine made a mistake, a public ugly mistake. Now she's acknowledging it and proposing a meaningful way to make amends." She looked around the table. "Isn't that precisely the kind of leadership we want? Someone who can admit failure and grow from it?" A thoughtful silence followed her words. Kate caught Margaret's eye and gave her a small, grateful nod. "This is all very touching," Richard said, his voice hardening. But sentimentality doesn't change the fact that Catherine's actions have damaged our brand and raised legitimate questions about her judgment. The market has already responded. Our stock dropped 3 points this morning. After your television appearance suggesting instability in leadership, Kate pointed out, not after the initial incident. Eleanor Winters, the legal counsel who had remained silent until now, cleared her throat. If I may, there's another aspect to consider. Forcing Catherine out at this juncture could be interpreted as admitting corporate liability for her personal actions. From a legal standpoint, that's problematic. Richard waved a dismissive hand. We can craft the messaging to avoid that implication. Can you? Ethan asked, his voice deceptively casual. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're using what happened to me as leverage in a power play you've been planning for months. Richard's face flushed. That's an outrageous accusation from someone who has no knowledge of this company's internal matters. Maybe, Ethan conceded, but I do know something about people who use others as props in their own dramas. Ms. Sinclair did it to me last night. He turned his gaze directly to Richard. And you're doing it to both of us right now. The parallel landed with impact. Several board members exchanged glances. This is absurd, Richard sputtered. We're here to discuss Catherine's leadership, not my motives. Are we? Harold Winters asked, his voice carrying the weight of his decades of experience. Because it seems to me we're witnessing the very leadership we're questioning. He looked at Kate with appraising eyes. You've admitted your mistake without excuses. You've faced the man you wronged directly. You've proposed a substantive response rather than a cosmetic fix. The old man nodded slowly. Your father would be proud. The mention of her father hit Kate like a physical blow. Her eyes burned with unexpected tears that she quickly blinked away. I move that we table the vote of no confidence, Margaret Chen said firmly. I second, Harold added immediately. Richard looked around the table, realizing the momentum had shifted. We can't simply ignore what happened. The public hasn't forgotten, even if this board is willing to. No one is suggesting we ignore it, Kate said, regaining her composure. I'm suggesting we transform it into something meaningful. She turned to the board. Give me 6 months to implement the music education initiative, with Mr. Miller's guidance. Judge me on the results, both in terms of the program's impact and how it affects our corporate reputation. And if we're not satisfied after 6 months, Richard challenged. Kate met his gaze unflinchingly. Then I'll resign voluntarily. No fight, no messy public battle. A clean transition to new leadership. The boldness of the offer silenced even Richard temporarily. The board members looked at each other, weighing the proposal. All in favor of tabling the vote of no confidence and adopting Ms. Sinclair's 6-month proposal? Harold called out. Hands rose around the table, first Margaret and Harold, then others, until 9 of the 12 board members had voted in favor. Richard watched, his expression darkening as his carefully orchestrated coup collapsed before his eyes. Motion carries, Harold announced. Ms. Sinclair remains CEO, with a 6-month review period focused on the implementation and impact of the new Sinclair Foundation Music Initiative. Kate exhaled slowly, the tension draining from her shoulders. She had survived, for now, but the real work was just beginning. As the board members gathered their materials to leave, Richard approached Kate, his smile tight and his voice low enough that only she could hear. This isn't over, Catherine. You've bought yourself 6 months, nothing more. Maybe, Kate replied calmly, or maybe I've finally figured out what kind of leader I want to be. Either way, I suggest you start looking for a new strategy. This one failed rather spectacularly. Richard's smile vanished entirely. He glanced at Ethan with undisguised contempt, then strode from the room without another word. When everyone had gone except Kate and Ethan, she collapsed back into her chair, the composed CEO facade falling away to reveal exhaustion. That was intense, Ethan observed. Welcome to corporate America, Kate said with a weak smile, where family dysfunction meets shareholder value. Your uncle really hates you, Ethan noted. The feeling is increasingly mutual. Kate rubbed her temples. But he's right about one thing. This isn't over. I have 6 months to make this music initiative work, or I lose everything. No pressure, Ethan said dryly. Kate looked up at him, really seeing him for perhaps the first time, not as the invisible service worker she had humiliated, not as the virtuoso pianist who had stunned a roomful of elites, but as a person with his own complex story and motivations. "Why did you help me in there?" she asked. "You could have sided with Richard, pushed for my removal. After what I did to you, no one would have blamed you." Ethan considered the question carefully. "I don't think your uncle would be any better for this company or this foundation than you are. And despite everything, I believe people can change, even billionaire heiresses who think the world exists to serve them." "That's surprisingly optimistic," Kate said. "I'm a musician at heart," Ethan replied with a small shrug. "We tend to believe in the possibility of transformation. Otherwise, why create art at all?" The simplicity and depth of his answer caught Kate off guard. She was accustomed to corporate strategists, to people who calculated every move based on potential profit or loss. Ethan's perspective was refreshingly different. "So," she said after a moment, "do we have a deal? Will you work with me on this music initiative? For real, not just for show." Ethan extended his hand across the table. "For the next 6 months at least. After that, we'll see." Kate took his hand, feeling the calluses on his fingertips, evidence of countless hours at the piano in a previous life. Their handshake sealed a most unexpected alliance. Neither of them knew it yet, but those 6 months would change them both in ways they couldn't begin to imagine. The next 4 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Kate and Ethan threw themselves into the development of the Sinclair Foundation Music Initiative with an intensity that surprised them both. What had begun as a strategic move to save Kate's position had evolved into something neither of them had anticipated, a genuine partnership. They were working late in Kate's office, takeout containers scattered across her usually immaculate desk, when Kate noticed Ethan staring at the elaborate proposal they'd created. "Something wrong with the budget allocations?" she asked, assuming he was reviewing the financial details. Ethan shook his head. "No, I was just thinking about how different this is from what I expected. The initiative. This," he gestured between them, "working with you. When I walked into your office a month ago, I thought you were exactly what you seemed that night at the gala, entitled, cruel, completely disconnected from reality." Kate winced. "And now? Now I think you're complicated." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "You work harder than anyone I've ever met. You know the name of every maintenance person in this building. You fight for every dollar in this budget like it's coming from your personal bank account." "Is that a compliment?" Kate asked, a small smile playing at her lips. "An observation," Ethan replied. "You're not who I thought you were, or maybe you're becoming someone different. I haven't decided yet." The assessment was fair. Kate had surprised herself over the past month. What had started as damage control had become something more meaningful, a chance to redefine her leadership and, perhaps, herself in the process. "What about you?" she asked. "Have you thought about playing again? Professionally, I mean." The question hung in the air. They had been working closely together for weeks, but Ethan's personal life, particularly his relationship with music, remained largely off limits. "Sometimes," he admitted after a long pause, "working on this initiative, visiting schools, seeing kids discover music for the first time, it stirred things up." "That's good, isn't it?" Ethan shrugged. "It's complicated. Music was my identity for so long. Then it became tangled up with grief, with my parents, with debt." He gestured to the grand piano in the corner of Kate's office, an instrument she had installed specifically for their work together, though Ethan had never played it. "I'm not sure I know who I am when I sit at a piano anymore." Kate studied him thoughtfully. Over the past month, she had discovered that Ethan was far more than the talented victim of her cruelty. He was insightful, principled, and possessed a quiet wisdom that continually surprised her. His commitment to ensuring the music initiative had real substance, rather than just PR value, had challenged her in unexpected ways. "Maybe you don't have to know," she suggested. "Maybe you just play and see what happens." Ethan's expression softened. "Is that how you approach life, Ms. CEO? Just dive in and figure it out as you go?" "Hardly," Kate laughed. "I have 5-year strategic plans for my 5-year strategic plans. But sometimes," she hesitated, then continued more softly, "sometimes the most important things can't be planned. They have to be experienced." The moment felt unexpectedly intimate. They had spent countless hours together developing the initiative, but this was different. A genuine connection forming between two people who, under any other circumstances, would never have known each other beyond the most superficial level. The moment was broken by Kate's phone chiming with a message. She glanced at it and her expression darkened. "Richard," Ethan guessed. Kate nodded. "Board update meeting tomorrow. He's been surprisingly quiet lately, too quiet. You think he's planning something?" "I know he is," Kate said grimly. "Richard doesn't give up, especially not when his pride is involved. He's regrouping, looking for a new angle of attack." "We'll be ready," Ethan said with unexpected firmness. "The initiative is solid. The media coverage has been positive. Public opinion is shifting." Kate looked at him curiously. "We?" "Figure of speech," Ethan said quickly, but a faint color rose in his cheeks. Kate let it go, but the word lingered in her mind. We. Somehow, against all odds, they had become a team. The following morning, Kate strode into the boardroom with Ethan beside her. They had prepared a comprehensive presentation on the initiative's progress. Schools selected, curriculum developed, instruments purchased, teaching artists hired. Richard was already there, looking irritatingly well-rested and confident. Beside him sat a woman Kate didn't recognize. Elegant, mid-40s, with the poised demeanor of someone accustomed to boardrooms. "Catherine," Richard greeted her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'd like you to meet Victoria Hargrove. She's joining us today as a consultant." Kate's instincts immediately went on high alert. "Consultant for what, exactly?" "The Sinclair Foundation Music Initiative," Victoria replied smoothly, extending a manicured hand. "I've spent 20 years developing arts education programs across the country. Richard thought my expertise might be valuable." Kate shook the woman's hand reflexively while shooting a look at her uncle. The move was clear. Richard was positioning an expert to critique whatever Kate and Ethan had built. "How thoughtful," Kate said dryly. "Though it might have been more valuable to consult Ms. Hargrove before we developed the program, not after we've already launched it." "Better late than never," Richard replied with a shrug. "The board wants assurance that we're implementing best practices, not just throwing money at a PR problem." The implication was clear and cutting. Kate felt Ethan tense beside her. As the other board members filed in, Kate leaned close to Ethan. "He's trying to undermine us before we even present. Standard Richard tactic." "What do we do?" Ethan murmured back. "We stick to the plan," Kate replied. "Our program is solid. We've done the work." The meeting began with the usual formalities. When it came time for their presentation, Kate and Ethan tag-teamed effortlessly, walking the board through the initiative's development, implementation, and early results. Despite the challenging circumstances, Kate felt a surge of pride. They had accomplished a remarkable amount in just 4 weeks. When they finished, Harold Winters nodded approvingly. "Impressive progress, Catherine. You and Mr. Miller have clearly put substantial thought into this." "Thank you," Kate replied. "We've been working closely with educators, musicians, and community leaders to ensure the program has real impact." "Very commendable," Victoria Hargrove interjected smoothly, "though I do have some concerns about sustainability." And there it was, the attack Kate had been expecting. "What specific concerns, Ms. Hargrove?" Ethan asked, his tone polite but firm. Victoria smiled sympathetically. "Based on my experience, programs like this often fail because they focus on splashy launches, new instruments, celebrity endorsements, media attention, without addressing the unglamorous infrastructure needed for long-term success. Teacher training, instrument maintenance, curriculum development, assessment, all of which are addressed in pages 12 through 17 of our proposal," Kate interrupted, sliding the relevant section across the table, "including a 5-year funding commitment, professional development for teachers, and partnerships with local instrument repair businesses." Victoria looked momentarily taken aback as she scanned the document. "We also have a sustainability advisory board of music educators who meet weekly to evaluate and refine our approach," Ethan added. "Their feedback has been instrumental in shaping our implementation strategy." Victoria recovered quickly. "That's thorough. Though I notice your artist engagement seems heavily classical in focus, in urban communities you might find more resonance with jazz, hip-hop, or other contemporary forms." "If you'll turn to Appendix C," Ethan replied calmly, "you'll see our teaching artist roster includes musicians from classical, jazz, hip-hop, folk, and indigenous traditions. We believe students should have access to diverse musical expressions." Richard shifted uncomfortably as his expert's criticisms were systematically dismantled. Kate caught the flash of frustration in his eyes, and felt a small thrill of victory. "Well," Victoria said, clearly reassessing her approach, "it seems you've covered the bases more thoroughly than most new programs I've encountered." "We didn't want to launch until we were confident in both the program's quality and its sustainability," Kate said. "This isn't a publicity stunt, it's a commitment." The words came out with unexpected conviction. When had this initiative transformed from a strategic maneuver to save her job into something she genuinely believed in? Kate couldn't pinpoint the exact moment, but somewhere along the way, working with Ethan, seeing the impact of their efforts, something had changed within her. "I think we can all agree that the progress has been exemplary," Harold said, effectively closing that line of discussion. "Now, about the Carnegie Hall partnership opportunity." The meeting continued, with Richard making several more attempts to find fault with their work, each one deftly countered by Kate and Ethan's thorough preparation. By the end, even Victoria Hargrove was offering constructive suggestions rather than critiques. As the board members filed out, Richard lingered, his expression tightly controlled. "Quite a performance," he said, his voice low enough that only Kate and Ethan could hear. "You've clearly prepared well for today, but this is a marathon, not a sprint. 5 more months is a long time to maintain this charade." "It's not a charade, Richard," Kate replied evenly. "That's what you don't understand. We believe in this work." Richard's eyes narrowed as he glanced between them. "We? How touching. The billionaire and the janitor, united by a shared passion for music education." His tone made the words a mockery. "The media loves a redemption story, but trust me, Catherine, the novelty will wear off. And when it does, the board will remember why we were having this conversation in the first place." "Is there anything else, Richard?" Kate asked coldly. "Some actual business matter you'd like to discuss, or are you just here to make ominous predictions about my downfall?" Richard straightened his tie, composure firmly back in place. "Just a friendly reminder that the quantum computing presentation to key investors is next month, a make-or-break moment for the company's future. I do hope your extracurricular activities won't distract you from your actual responsibilities as CEO." With that parting shot, he left, Victoria Hargrove following in his wake. "Charming man, your uncle," Ethan observed dryly when they were alone. Kate sighed, the tension of the meeting finally catching up with her. "He's right about one thing. The quantum computing project is critical. I've been so focused on our initiative that I've been delegating more than I should on the corporate side." "You can't do everything," Ethan pointed out. "That's why you have executives." "Yes, but ultimately, I'm responsible." Kate gathered her presentation materials. "I need to refocus on the company while keeping our momentum with the foundation work." "We can adjust our schedule," Ethan suggested. "I can take on more of the day-to-day program implementation, free you up for the corporate priorities." Kate looked at him, struck again by how seamlessly they had become a team. "You'd do that?" "That's why you hired me, isn't it?" Ethan said with a small smile. "To make this initiative work. To make it real." "I didn't hire you," Kate reminded him. "We made a deal, and you've more than kept your end of it." They walked together toward the elevator, the morning sunlight streaming through the building's glass facade, illuminating the city beyond. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you," Kate said, as they waited for the elevator. "That piano in my office, you've never played it." Ethan's expression grew guarded. "No, I haven't." "Why not?" The elevator arrived with a soft chime, saving him from answering immediately. They stepped inside, alone in the small space as the doors closed. "I'm not ready," Ethan finally said, his voice quiet. "Not for an audience anyway, even an audience of one." Kate studied his profile, understanding dawning. "You haven't played at all since that night at the gala, have you? Not even in private?" Ethan shook his head. "That night was... I don't know what it was. Adrenaline, anger, pride. It all came pouring out through my fingers before I could think about what I was doing." "And now?" "Now I'd be thinking about it," Ethan admitted. "About what it means. About whether I'm betraying my parents by finding joy in music again. About whether I'm still the pianist I used to be." The elevator reached the ground floor and the doors opened, but neither of them moved to exit. "Tonight," Kate said suddenly, "come to my apartment. There's a piano there too, no audience, not even me, just you and the instrument for as long as you need." Ethan looked startled by the invitation. "Why would you do that?" Kate considered the question, searching for the honest answer. Because you've helped me remember who I wanted to be before I became someone I don't particularly like. Maybe I can return the favor." The simplicity and truth of her words surprised them both. For a moment they stood in silence, the open elevator doors a threshold neither was quite ready to cross. "Okay," Ethan said finally. Tonight, as they stepped out of the elevator and into the busy lobby, Kate realized something had fundamentally shifted between them. What had begun as a reluctant alliance, a business arrangement born of crisis, had become something neither of them had anticipated. Whatever it was, it felt dangerously close to friendship. 5 months had passed since that night at the Rosewood. 5 months of transformation, challenge, and unexpected discoveries. Kate stood at the back of the auditorium at PS 18 in Queens, watching as Ethan guided a 12-year-old girl through a difficult passage on the piano. The girl's face was a study in concentration, her fingers hesitant at first, then finding confidence as Ethan nodded encouragement. "That's it, Sophia," he said when she successfully completed the phrase. "You found the heart of it." The pride in Sophia's smile as she looked up at her teacher made something twist in Kate's chest. She had visited dozens of schools in the past months, watching the music initiative take root and flourish, but the moments of individual connection never failed to move her. Ethan glanced up, catching Kate's eye across the room. He gave a small nod of acknowledgement before turning his attention back to his student. That simple gesture contained a world of understanding between them, respect, partnership, and something deeper that neither had fully named. Kate slipped out quietly, not wanting to disrupt the lesson. Outside the school, her driver was waiting to take her back to Sinclair Tower for the board meeting that would determine her future. 6 months had nearly passed. Tomorrow would mark the deadline Richard had engineered, the moment of judgment on whether she would remain as CEO. The Sinclair Foundation Music Initiative had exceeded all expectations. Over 50 schools now had fully funded music programs. Hundreds of instruments had been distributed. Teaching artists were working with thousands of students. Media coverage had been consistently positive. Even Victoria Hargrove, Richard's hired critic, had recently published an op-ed praising the program's thoughtful implementation. By any objective measure, Kate had fulfilled her promise to the board. But Richard had never been interested in objective measures. Her phone buzzed with a message from Jessica. Richard called an executive session before the main meeting. Board members only. Kate's stomach tightened. An executive session meant she wouldn't be present for the initial discussion. Richard would have free rein to shape the narrative before she could defend herself. "Tell Ethan I'll meet him at the office later," she instructed her driver, her mind already racing through potential scenarios and responses. 2 hours later, Kate sat in her office reviewing the quantum computing presentation one last time. The project had hit every benchmark. The prototype had exceeded performance expectations. Investor interest was at an all-time high. Even the stock price had rebounded, reaching a new record just last week. On paper, her position should be secure. But Kate had been in corporate America long enough to know that paper didn't always matter when power and ego were at stake. The door opened, and Ethan walked in, still dressed in the casual clothes he wore for teaching. In the months they'd worked together, the formality between them had gradually dissolved, replaced by a comfortable familiarity neither had anticipated. "How was the rest of the lesson?" Kate asked, welcoming the momentary distraction from her anxiety about the board meeting. "Sophia's going to play at the school concert next month," Ethan said, a hint of pride in his voice. "She's come a long way." "So have you," Kate observed. 6 months ago, you wouldn't even touch a piano." It was true. That night at Kate's apartment had been a turning point. She had shown him to the piano room, then left him alone as promised. Hours later, she had fallen asleep to the distant sound of hesitant notes gradually becoming more confident, more fluid. By morning, Ethan had been gone, but something had changed. The following week, he had begun working directly with students, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. "So have you," Ethan countered, settling into what had become his usual chair. "The Catherine Sinclair I met at the gala wouldn't recognize the woman who sat on the floor with kindergartners last week, teaching them to keep a beat with wooden spoons." Kate laughed at the memory. "My $3,000 suit was never the same." "Worth the sacrifice," Ethan said with a smile. "Those kids will remember that day forever." A comfortable silence fell between them. So much had changed in 5 months. What had begun as a reluctant partnership had evolved into something neither of them had expected, a friendship built on mutual respect and shared purpose. "The board meeting is in an hour," Kate said finally, her voice more vulnerable than she intended. "Richard called an executive session beforehand." Ethan's expression grew serious. "That's not good." "No," Kate agreed. "He's making his final play." "What can I do?" Ethan asked simply. The question touched her. There had been a time when Catherine Sinclair would never have admitted needing help, especially not from someone she had once considered beneath her notice. That Kate was gone, transformed by months of work that had become much more than a reputation-saving strategy. "Be there," she said. "The full board will want to hear from you about the initiative's impact." "I meant after," Ethan clarified. "If things don't go your way." Kate hadn't allowed herself to fully consider that possibility. "The initiative is established now. Funding is secured for 5 years. It will continue regardless of what happens to me." "That's not what I asked," Ethan said quietly. Kate met his gaze, understanding the real question. Their work together had created something neither had anticipated, a connection that transcended their original arrangement. If she lost her position, what would happen to that connection? Before she could respond, Jessica appeared at the door. "They're ready for you both in the boardroom." The moment of truth had arrived. The boardroom felt different this time, charged with an energy Kate couldn't quite define. Richard sat at the far end of the table, his expression carefully neutral. The other board members were already seated, their faces giving nothing away. "Catherine," Richard began once she and Ethan had taken their seats, "the board has been discussing your leadership and the results of the 6-month review period we established." Kate nodded, maintaining her composure. "I'm prepared to discuss both the Sinclair Foundation Music Initiative and the company's overall performance during that period." "That won't be necessary," Richard said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "The board has already reached its decision." Kate felt Ethan tense beside her. This was it. Richard had outmaneuvered her after all, used the executive session to secure the votes he needed. "Before you announce that decision," Ethan said suddenly, "I'd like to say something." All eyes turned to him in surprise. Richard frowned. "Mr. Miller, with all due respect, this is a board matter regarding Catherine's leadership of Sinclair Technologies. While your involvement in the Foundation initiative has been noteworthy, this decision extends far beyond that single project." "I understand," Ethan replied calmly. "But I've had a unique perspective over these past months. I've watched Catherine transform not just a program, but herself. I've seen her question assumptions, listen to criticism, adapt her thinking, and ultimately create something meaningful that will benefit thousands of children for years to come." He looked around the table, meeting each board member's eyes in turn. "I came into this arrangement as someone who had experienced the worst of Catherine Sinclair. Her arrogance, her cruelty, her disconnect from the reality of ordinary people's lives. I had every reason to want her to fail." Kate stared at him, caught off guard by the raw honesty of his words. "Instead," Ethan continued, "I watched her become the leader her father believed she could be. Not perfect, none of us are, but someone willing to acknowledge mistakes, learn from them, and grow. In my experience, that's the rarest and most valuable quality in any leader." The room fell silent as his words hung in the air. Even Richard seemed momentarily at a loss for a response. Harold Winters cleared his throat. "Thank you for that perspective, Mr. Miller. It's certainly compelling." "Indeed," Richard recovered quickly. "A moving testimonial. However, the board has already voted." Kate steeled herself for the blow, hands clasped tightly under the table. "And we have decided unanimously," Richard continued, his voice betraying the slightest edge of resignation, "that Catherine will continue as CEO of Sinclair Technologies, with the executive committee conducting annual reviews rather than extraordinary interventions like this one." Kate blinked, certain she had misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" Harold Winters smiled kindly. "You're keeping your job, Catherine, and we're putting an end to these special review periods engineered to create instability in leadership." Kate looked around the table in disbelief, seeing confirmation in the board members' faces. Even those she had thought firmly in Richard's camp were nodding agreement. "I don't understand," she said, glancing at Richard's thunderous expression. "What changed?" Margaret Chen, the young board member who had supported Kate from the beginning, spoke up. Many things. The quantum computing project's success, the company's stock performance, the positive media coverage of the music initiative. But most importantly, Harold added, we've watched you grow as a leader. The Catherine Sinclair who humiliated a hotel employee at a gala 6 months ago is not the same Catherine sitting before us today. That transformation tells us more about your capacity for leadership than any quarterly earnings report. Kate felt a lump forming in her throat. Thank you for your confidence. I won't let you down. One more thing, Harold said, his tone shifting to something more formal. The board has also voted on a secondary matter. Richard has tendered his resignation as interim chairman, effective immediately. All eyes turned to Richard, who sat rigid with barely contained fury. As I explained in the executive session, I believe it's time for new blood in the leadership structure. I'll be focusing on my other business interests. The carefully crafted statement couldn't mask the truth written clearly on his face. Richard had made his final play and lost decisively. The board has elected me to serve as chairman until a permanent replacement is identified, Harold continued. We believe this will ensure stability during the transition. The meeting concluded shortly after, with discussions of upcoming projects and strategic initiatives. Through it all, Kate sat in a state of stunned relief, occasionally catching Ethan's eye across the table. His small, private smile told her everything she needed to know. He had expected this outcome even when she hadn't. As the board members filed out, Richard approached Kate, his mask of composure firmly back in place. Congratulations, Catherine, he said tightly. You've won this round. It wasn't a competition, Richard, Kate replied. It was about becoming the right person to lead this company, something you never understood. Richard's eyes flashed with anger. Don't be naive, it's always a competition. You played the board better than I did this time, with your touching redemption story and your musician's emotional appeal. Well done. He glanced at Ethan with undisguised contempt. Enjoy your victory while it lasts. Nothing is permanent in this business. With that, he strode from the room, the door closing firmly behind him. He's right about one thing, Ethan observed when they were alone. Nothing is permanent. Kate turned to him, suddenly realizing the implications of today's decision. The 6 months are up. Our arrangement has technically ended. Yes, Ethan agreed. I guess it has. An uncomfortable silence fell between them. For half a year they had worked side by side, their unlikely partnership forged in crisis and strengthened through shared purpose. Now that the crisis had passed, what remained? I'd like you to stay on, Kate said, the words coming out more quickly than she intended. As the permanent director of the Sinclair Foundation Music Initiative, full salary, benefits, complete creative control. Ethan looked surprised by the offer. You don't need me anymore. The program is established. Your position is secure. This isn't about what I need, Kate said, realizing the truth as she spoke. It's about what the program needs, what the students need. You've built something remarkable, Ethan. Those kids connect with you in a way they never could with me. And if I say no? Ethan asked quietly. Kate hadn't considered that possibility. Why would you? Ethan stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city spread below them. Because I've been thinking about playing again, professionally. The admission shouldn't have surprised her, but somehow it did. Kate had watched Ethan gradually reconnect with music over the past months, had seen the joy return to his face when he played. Of course, he would want to reclaim the career that had once defined him. That's wonderful, she managed, pushing aside the unexpected pang of loss. You should. Your talent is extraordinary. The thing is, Ethan continued, turning back to face her, I don't want to choose. Working with these kids, seeing what music can do in their lives, it's become as important to me as performing. So don't choose, Kate said simply. Do both. We can structure the position to allow you time for performance commitments. Ethan looked at her skeptically. You do that? Accommodate a schedule that puts the foundation second? Not second, Kate corrected. Alongside. Equal but different commitments to music. Just like you've helped me balance my commitment to the company and to the foundation. The parallel wasn't lost on Ethan. Over the past 6 months, they had each helped the other reclaim something essential that had been lost. For Kate, a sense of purpose beyond profit. For Ethan, the joy of music without the weight of grief. There's something else, Ethan said, his voice taking on a hesitancy she rarely heard from him. Something I've been meaning to talk to you about. Kate waited, suddenly nervous without knowing why. "I've been offered a performance at Carnegie Hall, a comeback concert, just one night." "Ethan, that's amazing," Kate exclaimed, genuinely thrilled for him despite her complicated emotions. "When?" "Next month, but I haven't accepted yet." "Why on earth not?" "It's Carnegie Hall. It's everything you worked for before." "Before my parents died," Ethan finished for her. "Before I walked away from music." Kate studied his face, sensing there was more. "What do you need to say yes?" Ethan took a deep breath. "I want the concert to be a benefit for the Sinclair Foundation Music Initiative. All proceeds going to expand the program to more schools." The request was so unexpected that Kate momentarily lost her composure. "You want to use your comeback performance to raise money for our initiative?" "It makes sense," Ethan said. "It connects my past to my present in a way that feels right. But there's one more thing." "What is it?" Kate asked, wondering what else he could possibly add to this already generous proposal. "I want you to be there, not just as the CEO of Sinclair Technologies or the founder of the initiative, as Catherine, as my friend." He paused, then added quietly, "as the person who ironically helped me find my way back to music." The word friend hung in the air between them, simultaneously accurate and insufficient to describe what they had become to each other over these 6 months. "I wouldn't miss it," Kate said softly, "not for anything." They looked at each other across the boardroom, the space that had witnessed their unlikely alliance now bearing witness to something new, a connection neither had sought, but both now valued beyond measure. "So," Kate said, extending her hand across the table, "partners?" Ethan took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. "Partners." 1 month later, Carnegie Hall was filled to capacity. The buzz of anticipation ran through the audience as they waited for Ethan Miller's return to the stage after 5 years of silence. In the front row, Catherine Sinclair sat beside Harold Winters, both representing the Sinclair Foundation that would benefit from the evening's proceeds. The house lights dimmed, a hush fell over the crowd, and then Ethan appeared, walking confidently to the magnificent Steinway at center stage. He wore a simple black suit, nothing flashy or distracting from the music to come. He took his seat at the piano, adjusted the bench with the familiar gesture Kate had first witnessed at the Rosewood Gala. But this time, when his fingers touched the keys, it wasn't defiance or pride driving the performance. It was joy, pure, unencumbered joy in the music itself. The first notes of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 filled the hall, achingly beautiful in their simplicity before building to the piece's famous complexity. Kate watched, transfixed, as Ethan's entire being seemed to merge with the music. This was who he was meant to be, not just a pianist, but a musician in the truest sense, someone who could translate emotion into sound. As the piece progressed, Kate found herself reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past 6 months. A chance collision, a cruel moment, a rash promise, all setting in motion a transformation neither of them could have imagined. She had become a better leader, a better person. He had reclaimed his music without betraying his past, and together they had created something that would outlast them both. Thousands of children discovering music who might otherwise never have had the chance. When the final notes faded, the audience erupted in thunderous applause. Ethan stood accepting their appreciation with humble grace. Then, unexpectedly, he gestured toward Kate in the front row, inviting her to join him on stage. Surprised but moved, Kate made her way up the steps. Standing beside Ethan before the audience, she felt a sudden overwhelming gratitude for the journey that had brought them here. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ethan addressed the crowd, his voice carrying clearly through the hall, "tonight is about more than music. It's about transformation, about second chances, about the possibility that exists when we see each other not as categories or functions, but as human beings with depth and complexity." He turned to Kate, his expression warm with friendship and something deeper, a shared understanding of how completely they had changed each other's lives. "None of this would have been possible without Catherine Sinclair," he continued, "who had the courage to transform a moment of cruelty into an opportunity for growth, who could have offered empty apologies, but instead built something meaningful that will change thousands of lives." Kate felt tears threatening and blinked them back. This public acknowledgement was unexpected and deeply moving. "Together," Ethan concluded, We've created the Sinclair Foundation Music Initiative, which your generosity tonight will help expand to reach even more students. Because we believe that every child deserves the chance to discover the transformative power of music, just as we have rediscovered it ourselves. The applause that followed was deafening. Standing there beside Ethan, facing a future neither of them could have imagined 6 months ago, Kate understood something profound about transformation. It rarely came in the ways you expected. Sometimes it arrived in a moment of public humiliation. Sometimes in the form of a person you might otherwise never have truly seen. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, it offered not just a second chance, but a better version of the life you had been living all along.